Repeal and replace ASFA. A national demand to reform CPS, foster care, dependency courts, law enforcement, and the entire child welfare system. Title: Congress, it is time to act. Congress, it is time to act. We are not asking Congress to stop protecting children. We are demanding that Congress build a better child welfare system. Children who are actually being abused, seriously neglected, sexually abused, exploited, trafficked, or placed in genuine danger need protection. At the same time, innocent families need protection from wrongful government intervention. We need a system based on evidence, truth, due process, family preservation, independent professional investigations, transparency, disability rights, reunification, foster care safety, and government accountability. Government has extraordinary power when it investigates families, enters homes, removes children, places children into foster care, restricts parental rights, and seeks termination of parental rights. Extraordinary government power requires extraordinary accountability. Part 1: Constitutional Rights. Title: Protect the First Amendment. Parents do not lose their constitutional rights because CPS becomes involved with their families. Parents have the right to speak, criticize government, contact elected representatives, file complaints, seek advocacy, associate with others, and petition government. Criticism of CPS, social workers, courts, law enforcement, or other government officials must not by itself become evidence of abuse, neglect, or parental unfitness. Government must not unlawfully retaliate against constitutionally protected speech. Title: Protect the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment matters in child welfare investigations. A CPS investigation does not automatically eliminate constitutional protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. Government officials must comply with applicable constitutional requirements when entering homes, conducting searches, seizing property, or taking emergency action. Emergency authority must not become a routine shortcut around judicial oversight. Title: Protect the 14th Amendment. Due process matters. Parents must receive meaningful notice of material allegations. Parents must have a meaningful opportunity to be heard, challenge evidence, present evidence, and defend their parental rights through appropriate judicial procedures. In Santosky v. Kramer, 455 U.S. 745, 1982, the United States Supreme Court held that before a state may completely and irrevocably terminate parental rights, due process requires the state to prove its allegations by at least clear and convincing evidence. That constitutional protection must have real meaning. Part 2: Reform CPS INVSTIGTONS. Title: Independent Professional Investigators. Serious allegations of child abuse and neglect should be investigated by qualified, independent professional investigators. Social workers should not have unchecked authority to investigate allegations, determine credibility, collect evidence, manage the resulting case, provide services, and then present their own investigative conclusions to the court. Investigators should investigate. Social workers should focus on services, prevention, family assistance, case management, and reunification. Title: Review the complete CPS record. Independent investigators must review all relevant internal child welfare records before reaching material conclusions about a family. Review hotline calls. Review referrals. Review previous investigations. Review safety assessments. Review case notes. Review supervisor records. Review material emails and communications. Review complaints. Review service requests. Review relevant recordings. Review evidence supporting allegations. Review evidence contradicting allegations. Do not begin and end an investigation with only the latest accusation. Title: Review parents' previous calls for help. Investigators must review previous calls and communications made by parents themselves. Some parents may have contacted CPS because they were asking for help, requesting services, reporting danger, reporting another person's behavior, or trying to protect their children. Investigators must determine: what did the parent report? When did the parent report it? What did CPS know? When did CPS know it? What assistance did the parent request? What did CPS do? What did CPS fail to do? A parent's previous request for help must not be improperly omitted when doing so would create a materially misleading history. Title: Investigate Government Conduct 2. An independent investigation cannot examine only what a parent allegedly did wrong. Investigators must examine relevant government conduct too. Did CPS properly respond to earlier reports? Were required services provided? Did supervisors properly review the case? Were records accurate? Were material facts omitted? Were legally required disability accommodations provided? Were parents' previous requests for assistance appropriately addressed? Follow the evidence wherever it leads. Title: Test the evidence. A social worker's report should not automatically become the truth simply because a government employee wrote it. Test the evidence. Review the records. Compare the reports. Examine photographs. Examine recordings. Examine medical evidence. Examine electronic communications. Identify material contradictions. The question must always be, what does the evidence actually establish? Part 3: Government Transparency. Title: Require body cameras. Social workers conducting designated field investigations, home visits, removals, interviews, transportation, and other appropriate official activities should be required to use body-worn cameras. The law must include strong protections for children's privacy, confidential reporters, medical information, privileged communications, sensitive interviews, and other legally protected information. When an important interaction can lawfully and reasonably be recorded, a written report should not necessarily be the only record. Title: Government Vehicle GPS Accountability. Government vehicles used for designated official child welfare activities should maintain appropriate GPS records. There should be an auditable record of relevant official travel connected with investigations, home visits, removals, placements, transportation, and other designated activities. Privacy, access, retention, and permissible use must be established by law. Title: Preserve government communications. Material government emails, text messages, electronic records, video communications, and other official communications must be preserved according to applicable law. Government personnel must not intentionally use private accounts, unofficial communication systems, or outside individuals for the purpose of avoiding lawful recordkeeping, evidence preservation, discovery, or accountability. Title: Record Material Official Communications. Material official interviews, video calls, meetings, and other designated case-related communications should be recorded or reliably documented when legally permitted. Recordings must be protected against unauthorized alteration, deletion, destruction, or disclosure. Part 4: Stop Unlawful Surveillance and Retaliation. Title: Stop Unlawful Stalking and Harassment. Child Welfare Authority must never become permission to unlawfully stalk, harass, intimidate, threaten, or improperly surveil parents or families. Government employment does not create unlimited authority to follow or monitor parents. Title: Do not send other people to unlawfully monitor parents. Government personnel must not use private individuals, contractors, nonprofit organizations, service providers, acquaintances, or other third parties to engage in unlawful stalking, harassment, intimidation, or surveillance that government officials themselves could not lawfully perform. Government must not use another person to circumvent constitutional or statutory protections. Title: No retaliatory surveillance. Parents have the right to obtain attorneys, file complaints, contact elected representatives, request records, pursue appeals, seek advocacy, and criticize government. Those activities must not become justification for unlawful retaliation, harassment, intimidation, or unauthorized surveillance. Title: Document lawfully authorized surveillance. When investigative surveillance is lawfully authorized and genuinely necessary, it should be appropriately documented. There must be a legitimate investigative purpose and appropriate accountability concerning authorization, responsible personnel, relevant dates, and evidence obtained. Part 5: Court Reform and Evidence. Title: Social workers must testify about material disputed statements. When government materially relies upon disputed allegations, observations, conclusions, or recommendations made by social workers, parents should have a meaningful opportunity through appropriate judicial procedures to obtain testimony and examination concerning those statements. Government employment does not automatically make someone's statement true. Title: Material witnesses must be subject to meaningful questioning. When government materially relies upon a witness's disputed allegations to establish abuse, neglect, danger, or parental unfitness, parents should ordinarily have a meaningful opportunity through appropriate judicial procedures to challenge that evidence. A disputed accusation should not simply travel from a witness to a social worker, from a social worker into a report, and from that report into a judicial finding without meaningful examination. Appropriate protections must remain for children, confidential reporters, privileged communications, and other legally protected circumstances. Title: Courts must independently examine evidence. Dependency courts must serve as independent safeguards between government power and families. Judges should not automatically accept government reports as true merely because government employees prepared them. Removing children is serious. Permanently terminating parental rights is even more serious. Government actions this powerful require reliable evidence and meaningful due process. Title: Preserve evidence and maintain audit trails. Preserve body camera recordings. Preserve relevant GPS records. Preserve government communications. Preserve photographs. Preserve reports. Preserve case notes. Preserve hotline records. Preserve video communications. Preserve investigative materials. Electronic child welfare systems should maintain audit trails showing material changes and, where technically feasible, which authorized account made those changes. Title: Accountability for intentional falsification. Knowingly fabricating material evidence, intentionally making materially false statements, deliberately concealing material evidence, or intentionally altering investigative records should result in independent investigation and appropriate consequences when proven. An innocent mistake or professional disagreement is not automatically intentional misconduct. Accountability itself requires evidence and due process. Part 6: Follow the money. Title: Taxpayers deserve transparency. Taxpayers deserve to know where public child welfare money goes. Government should provide appropriate transparency concerning contracts, grants, contractors, nonprofit organizations, foster care providers, service providers, and other entities receiving taxpayer funding. Title: Expose material conflicts of interest. Government-funded organizations must be subject to meaningful conflict of interest requirements. Relevant financial relationships, contracts, referral arrangements, employment relationships, and other material interests capable of affecting child welfare decisions should be disclosed according to law. Receiving government funding alone does not prove wrongdoing. Actual material conflicts must be independently reviewable. Part 7: Foster care reform. Title: Reform the foster care system. Child welfare reform cannot stop with CPS. The foster care system must be reformed too. When government removes children from parents and places them into foster homes, group homes, residential facilities, or other placements, government assumes an enormous responsibility for their safety. Children must never be removed in the name of safety only to experience abuse in the placement selected for them. Title: Investigate sexual abuse and other serious abuse in foster care. Every credible allegation of sexual abuse, sexual assault, exploitation, trafficking, serious physical abuse, or other serious mistreatment of a child in foster care must receive a prompt, professional, and impartial investigation. When criminal conduct is reasonably suspected, appropriate law enforcement involvement must occur consistent with applicable law. Title: Mandatory background checks. Comprehensive legally required background screening must occur before individuals are approved to serve as foster parents or assume other covered caregiving positions. Applicable criminal history and child abuse or neglect registry checks should be completed before approval, subject to federal and state law. Required checks must also cover other adults residing in foster homes when applicable. Appropriate periodic rescreening should also be considered. Title: Background checks for foster care employees. Appropriate screening requirements should apply to covered employees and other individuals responsible for children in group homes, residential facilities, foster family agencies, and other placement settings. Children deserve strong safeguards regardless of where government places them. Title: Investigate the entire foster placement. When credible evidence indicates serious abuse inside a foster placement, investigators must examine the complete relevant history. Review previous complaints. Review previous placements. Review licensing records. Review inspection records. Review incident reports. Determine whether other children previously reported similar conduct. Determine what the agency knew. Determine when it knew. Determine what it did. Determine what it failed to do. Title: Children must have a safe way to report abuse. Every child in foster care must have an accessible and confidential way to report sexual abuse, assault, exploitation, physical abuse, threats, retaliation, or unsafe living conditions to an appropriate independent authority. Children with disabilities must receive effective communication access. Children must not be punished, threatened, silenced, or retaliated against for making good faith reports. Title: Independent interviews with foster children. Children should have appropriate opportunities to speak privately with authorized investigators, attorneys, advocates, or other legally designated independent professionals. Interviews should be trauma-informed, age-appropriate, disability-accessible, and designed to protect children and the integrity of investigations. Title: Investigate foster care agencies too. Accountability cannot stop with an individual foster parent. When serious abuse occurs, investigators must determine whether foster care agencies, licensing authorities, contractors, facilities, or child welfare agencies received previous warnings. Were complaints ignored? Were licensing violations overlooked? Were inspections completed? Did somebody know the placement was unsafe? Was the child left there anyway? Follow the evidence. Title: Independent review after serious harm. When a child in foster care dies or suffers catastrophic injury, sexual assault, or other serious harm, there should be an appropriate independent investigation or review. Determine what happened. Determine whether previous warnings existed. Determine whether those warnings were properly investigated. Determine whether licensing requirements were followed. Determine whether government officials or contractors followed required procedures. Part 8: Disability RIGHTS and Family Preservation. Title: Protect parents and children with disabilities. Parents and children with disabilities deserve meaningful and equal access throughout the child welfare system. Legally required qualified interpreters and other accommodations must be provided during investigations, interviews, meetings, services, evaluations, reunification planning, and court proceedings. Government failures to provide legally required effective communication must not improperly be transformed into evidence that parents refuse to cooperate. Title: Family preservation must matter. When children can safely remain with their families, government policy should prioritize keeping families together. When removal is genuinely necessary, government should provide meaningful services addressing the conditions causing removal and supporting safe reunification. Federal funding should support prevention, family preservation, kinship care, disability access, and successful reunification. Part 9: Federal audits and Congressional Oversight. Title: Congress must review federal audits. Congress must not rely only on testimony from child welfare agencies when deciding whether the system is working. Congress should review existing federal audits, evaluations, oversight reports, compliance reviews, inspections, corrective action findings, and child welfare data. Review what federal oversight has already found. Review whether states repeatedly failed applicable federal requirements. Review whether corrective action plans actually corrected identified problems. Review whether the same deficiencies continued. Review how federal child welfare money was spent. Review foster care outcomes. Review child safety outcomes. Review family preservation outcomes. Review reunification outcomes. Review whether children suffered serious harm after entering government-supervised care. Title: Compare federal audits with state and county records. Congress should compare federal findings with relevant state audits, county records, licensing records, foster care investigations, corrective action plans, and reliable government data. Do not examine one report and stop. Look for patterns. Compare the years. Compare the states. Compare the agencies. Compare the funding. Compare the outcomes. Title: Bring federal findings before Congress. When federal audits or oversight reviews identify serious or repeated child welfare deficiencies, Congress should examine those findings during oversight hearings. Congress should ask: what did the audit find? When did government know? What corrective action was required? Was corrective action completed? Did the problem continue? How much federal money continued to be provided? Were children and families safer afterward? Title: Federal audits must lead to accountability. Audits should not become reports that are published and forgotten. When credible federal findings identify systemic failures, Congress should use its legislative and oversight authority to determine whether laws, funding conditions, enforcement mechanisms, or government practices need to change. Read the audits. Follow the findings. Follow the money. Examine the outcomes. Require accountability. Part 10: States must comply. Title: Federal funding requires federal accountability. Congress should establish clear and lawful requirements for designated federal child welfare and foster care funding. If states choose to accept those federal funds, they must comply with the lawful conditions attached to them. Federal taxpayer money must not operate as a blank check. Title: Independent federal compliance audits. States receiving designated federal child welfare funding should be subject to meaningful federal compliance oversight. Audit CPS. Audit foster care programs. Audit contractors. Audit public funding. Audit compliance. Examine the records. Examine the evidence. Follow the money. Title: Require corrective action. When significant noncompliance is identified, states should ordinarily receive formal findings and mandatory corrective action requirements. Serious, intentional, systemic, repeated, or uncorrected violations should result in escalating consequences. Title: States that refuse to comply can lose designated federal funds. If a state voluntarily accepts designated federal child welfare funds, it must comply with lawful conditions attached to those funds. If a state materially and repeatedly refuses to comply, Congress should authorize reduction, suspension, withholding, or termination of designated federal funding as permitted by federal law. Federal money requires federal accountability. Title: Do not punish children for government failures. Children should not lose essential assistance because government agencies violated federal requirements. Congress should structure enforcement so essential services for children and families can continue whenever possible while meaningful consequences fall upon responsible government entities. Part 11: Congress must ACT. Title: Congress must investigate the entire system. Congress hold hearings. Investigate ASFA. Investigate CPS. Investigate foster care. Investigate dependency court procedures. Investigate child welfare funding. Investigate family separation. Investigate foster care and adoption incentives. Investigate termination of parental rights. Investigate reunification outcomes. Investigate sexual abuse and other serious abuse in foster care. Investigate background check failures. Investigate licensing failures. Investigate disability access. Investigate government record-keeping. Investigate conflicts of interest. Investigate surveillance practices. Investigate failures to protect children. Investigate allegations of wrongful government intervention. And review the federal audits that already document problems within the system. Title: Listen to the people. Congress must hear from affected parents. Hear from current and former foster youth. Hear from survivors of abuse in foster care. Hear from relatives. Hear from families with disabilities. Hear from attorneys. Hear from independent investigators. Hear from social workers. Hear from researchers. Hear from people who have directly experienced the system. Title: Focus on children who are actually in danger. Child welfare agencies must focus resources on children experiencing actual abuse, serious neglect, sexual abuse, exploitation, trafficking, or genuine danger. Reform is not only about preventing wrongful removals. It must also address failures to protect children who genuinely need intervention. When credible warning signs exist, investigate them professionally. When reliable evidence establishes danger, protect the child. Part 12: Our National Demand. Title: Protect children without destroying innocent families. Our message is simple. When a child is genuinely being abused, protect that child. When a child is genuinely in serious danger, act. When a child reports abuse in foster care, listen and investigate professionally. But when children are safe with their families, government must not manufacture or exaggerate allegations, conceal material contrary evidence, or rely upon unsupported allegations to destroy those families. We need both. Child protection and family protection. Child safety and constitutional rights. Title: Congress, do your job. Congress represents the American people. Listen to families. Listen to children. Listen to former foster youth. Listen to survivors. Read the federal audits. Read the oversight reports. Look at the evidence. Look at the records. Look at the outcomes. Look at CPS. Look at foster care. Look at dependency courts. Look at government contractors. Follow taxpayer money. Determine what is working. Determine what is failing. And change what needs to be changed. Title: Repeal and replace ASFA. We are not demanding an end to child protection. We are demanding a better system. A system that protects children from actual abuse. A system that protects children while they are in foster care. A system that protects innocent families from wrongful government intervention. A system that respects the First Amendment. A system that respects the Fourth Amendment. A system that respects 14th Amendment due process. A system that protects disability rights. A system that investigates professionally and independently. A system that tests evidence. A system that preserves records. A system that requires appropriate foster care background checks. A system that investigates credible allegations of abuse inside foster care. A system that listens when children say they are unsafe. A system that reviews federal audits instead of ignoring them. A system that follows taxpayer money. A system that holds government accountable. Government possesses extraordinary power when it intervenes between parents and their children. Extraordinary government power requires extraordinary accountability. Protect children. Protect families. Protect children in foster care. Protect constitutional rights. Review the complete record. Review the federal audits. Test the evidence. Preserve the evidence. Require independent investigations. Require foster care accountability. Require federal accountability. Repeal and replace ASFA. Reform CPS. Reform foster care. Reform dependency courts. Reform government oversight. Reform the entire child welfare system.